usually are feminine pronouns the preferred pronoun in writing, I have chosen to lean into the trope a bit and follow the lead of the stories I share by defaulting to she and her in most cases. I have always been a little bit obsessed with witches. More specifically, I have always been a little bit obsessed with what witches do. Magic. For me, the defining characteristic of witches is that they cast spells, they bottle potions, they transform those who wrong or offend them into various denizens of swamp and field. When I was in elementary school, I spent an inordinate amount of time scouring our small-town school library for anything remotely magical. At first, I was interested in the sword and sorcery I had seen in films and television shows, but very quickly I found there were people who used magic not for zapping lightning bolts from their fingers, but for ever so slightly nudging fate in their favor. Sometimes that nudge wound up causing problems for other people, and sometimes it was simply a twist of luck for the better. What I noticed with many of the spells I found was that they would be gathered alongside things like nursery rhymes, fairy tales, and descriptions of holidays and festivals from around the world. The magic was part of something called folklore, and I was hooked. Coming to the crossroads. Finding New World Witchery. The combination of folklore and magic has been my passion and my focus for nearly 2.5 decades. I began collecting spells and tidbits of folk magic on index cards, in journals, on sticky notes and scraps tucked into books of folk tales. My search for magic led me to pick up spells like a magpie, trying them out, seeing what worked, and putting down what didn't. It led me to the strange sections of libraries and odd monsters in the shadows of old stories. It led me to try to learn new languages, dozens of them, just to understand some of the spells I found in their original words. I am by no means a polyglot, but I have a somewhat unhealthy obsession with picking up phrase books and using language learning software, or taking classes in 6 languages in college, and thus knowing just enough to be dangerous when I try to ask where the bathroom is in a number of countries. I have pursued advanced degrees, eventually taking a doctorate with a focus on folklore studies, specifically because of my interest in folk magic. With my longtime magical partner, I have created and hosted a long-running podcast about folk magic in North America, a project that has afforded me the opportunity to interview dozens of magical practitioners and scholars from a wide variety of backgrounds. That same project connects me with thousands of listeners, many of whom also are eager to share their experiences of magic or to ask questions that prompt me to look more deeply at certain parts of North American folklore and magical work than I might have otherwise. In this regard, I have been incredibly lucky and privileged to pursue this passion. I've also worked very hard to pull all these disparate strands together for myself and others, and to identify what I would call New World Witchery. I will note here that while I use the term New World, I am really referring to North America. This was sort of an early flub on my part in equating the two terms. The New World, from a European perspective, actually includes North America, South America, and even Oceania, especially Australia and New Zealand as well. I am not an expert on most of the magical traditions of South America or Oceania, however, so I will leave it to a better-equipped writer to discuss those lands and their magic, and eagerly encourage them to point out my shortcomings here as part of their work. Why the New World part? Well, one thing I found very early and often in my studies was how closely magic linked to location. There is a strong sense that the place of magic shapes the form of magic. Huge amounts of magical lore from Europe have found their way into print through brilliant, sometimes nefariously brilliant authors. In my collecting days, before I started the podcast or pursued my degrees, I moved overseas to live in Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic, in order to teach English. While there, I experienced a lot of enchantment, and all of it seemed extremely particular to the Slavic people who lived there. Stories abounded of alchemists living in tiny row houses near the palace, a king with a love of the occult and esoteric, saints' bodies.